spiritual experiences of my life. Later that afternoon, I found myself at a busy intersection, completely lost in thought about how wonderful the Lord is. I was so deep in reflection that I didn't even notice the traffic light had turned green. But it's a good thing I wasn't alone because, oh, how people love Jesus. The gentleman in the car behind me must have been a true believer because he began honking wildly, clearly eager to spread the joy of the Lord. I barely had time to react before others joined in, car horns blaring in a symphony of faith. One man, particularly passionate, leaned out of his window and shouted, "For the love of God, go, go, Jesus Christ, go! What enthusiasm, a true cheerleader for our Savior!" Encouraged by this display of unity, I decided to share in the moment. I rolled down my window and gave a big, joyful wave to all my fellow believers. Some even waved back. One kind soul, so overcome with emotion, held up a single finger, just one, as if to say, "One God, one love." Curious, I turned to my grandson, who was giggling in the back seat. I asked what that special gesture meant. Between fits of laughter, he assured me it was a Hawaiian good luck sign. Well, I've never been to Hawaii, but I certainly wasn't going to be rude. So I leaned out my window and gave the good luck sign right back. By this point, a few people were so moved that they got out of their cars and started walking towards me. I imagined they wanted to pray together or perhaps invite me to their church. Unfortunately, that's when I noticed the light had turned green again. With a big smile, I waved one last time and drove off, the only car to make it through the intersection before the light changed back to red. What a pity. I had to leave all those wonderful people behind after such a heartwarming moment of shared faith. Still, I didn't want them to feel forgotten. So, as I drove away, I leaned out the window once more and gave them all the Hawaiian good luck sign one last time. Praise the Lord for such wonderful folks. Love, Grandma. In a quiet little village, there lived a remarkable couple known far and wide for their astonishing longevity. The husband was 102 years old, his wife 98, yet both were as fit and strong as people half their age. They worked their farm every day, their energy seemingly untouched by time. One afternoon, a curious visitor to the village decided he had to know their secret. He made his way to the couple's farm, where he found the old man chopping wood, shirtless, muscles rippling, sweat glistening on his skin like that of a man decades younger. The visitor approached, wide-eyed. "Excuse me, sir, I heard you're 102 years old." The old man smiled and nodded. "That's correct. I must say you look incredible for your age. What's your secret?" The old man wiped his brow and chuckled. "Help me carry this wood back to the house, and I'll tell you." Curious and eager, the visitor grabbed a few logs and followed him inside. Once they were settled, the old man leaned back in his chair and began his story. "You see, my wife and I have been married for 75 years. And when we first got married, we made a little arrangement. Every time we had an argument, the one who lost had to run 5 kilometers. The visitor's eyes widened. "That's incredible. So you've been running almost every day for 75 years? No wonder you're in such great shape." The old man grinned. "Exactly." Then, after a moment of thought, the visitor frowned. "But wait, your wife is just as fit as you. How do you explain that?" The old man's smile grew wider. "Oh, that's easy. She usually runs after me to make sure I finish the whole 5. It was Christmas morning, and the family had gathered around the tree, exchanging gifts and sharing laughter. Among them sat old Adam, happily unwrapping his presents. But there was one little habit of his that had begun to test everyone's patience. Each time he opened a gift, he meticulously counted everything inside. "Oh, wonderful, 4 steak knives. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Perfect." He unwrapped another package. "A dozen wrenches? Brilliant. Let's check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 11, and 12. Just right." Then came a set of wine glasses. 4 glasses, neat. 1, 2, 3, and 1 more makes 4. Excellent. Gift after gift, the same routine continued. His children exchanged exasperated glances. His grandchildren sighed. His wife's eye twitched with every counted item. Still, Adam carried on. 50 fishing lures, oh my. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was the last straw. His wife suddenly threw up her hands and shouted, "Oh, for father's sake, Adam, it was 1 rib. Let it go." It was the young woman's first time in Rome, and she was eager to take in all its beauty. After wandering through the winding streets, she found herself drawn to the towering presence of a magnificent cathedral. She had heard tales of its breathtaking stained glass windows and decided to step inside for a closer look. As she approached the grand entrance, a kindly but stern-looking priest suddenly stepped forward, raising a hand to stop her. "Excuse me, miss," he said with a polite but firm tone. "I'm afraid I can't let you enter dressed like that." The woman blinked in confusion. She glanced down at herself. "Like what? My dress is modest." The priest hesitated, clearing his throat awkwardly. "It's not the dress itself, miss. It's the fact that you're not wearing a bra. I can't allow you inside like that." The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you serious? I have a divine right." The priest sighed, shaking his head. "A divine left too, miss, but you still can't come in." One day, a wife was looking in the mirror, feeling a bit reflective. You know, I'm 55 years old now, she said to her husband, but one of your friends keeps complimenting me. The husband, not missing a beat, looked up from his newspaper and asked, "Was it Bob by any chance?" Surprised, the wife nodded. "Yay! How'd you know?" With a grin, the husband replied, "Well, that's easy. Bob is a scrap dealer. He's got an eye for old things that still hold some value." The elderly priest sat in his office, sipping tea as he chatted with the younger priest about the many changes that had taken place in their church. "I have to admit," the older priest said, "replacing the first 4 pews with plush bucket theater seats was a stroke of genius. The front of the church used to be empty, but now it fills up first." The young priest grinned. "I'm glad you think so, Father." The older priest continued, "And I was skeptical at first, but when you suggested adding a bit more rhythm to the music, I supported you. That rock and roll gospel choir of yours has packed the church to the balcony every Sunday." "I appreciate your trust in me," the young priest replied. "It's wonderful to see more young people coming back to church." The elderly priest nodded. "Yes, all of these ideas have been well and good." But then he sighed, setting his cup down with a weary shake of his head. "However, I'm afraid you've gone too far with the drive-through confessional." The young priest sat up straight. "But, Father, my system has doubled both confessions and donations." The older priest rubbed his temples. "Yes, and I appreciate that, but that flashing neon sign you put on the roof..." Josh was strolling down the street when he spotted his friend Michael hurrying along, arms overloaded with shopping bags, a nervous look on his face. "Michael, you all right? You seem kind of jumpy." Michael sighed, setting his bags down for a moment. "Yeah, I just came back from that new state-of-the-art supermarket they opened in the industrial district." Josh's eyes lit up. "Oh, I heard it's incredible. What's it like?" Michael hesitated, rubbing his chin. "Well, kind of incredible." Intrigued, Josh listened as Michael described the store in animated detail. The place was designed to be the most authentic shopping experience imaginable. In the dairy aisle, you don't just see milk, you hear cows mooing, and the whole place smells like a barn. In the egg section, you hear chickens clucking from a coop suspended overhead. And the produce section, you can hear farmers calling to each other, and the scent of fresh fields fills the air. Josh was amazed. "That sounds incredible." Michael nodded slowly, his expression shifting into a grimace. "Yeah, in principle." He picked up his bags and sighed. "But this is the last time I'm buying toilet paper there." 3 skilled technicians applied for a job at the local telephone company. After reviewing their applications, the boss was impressed. On paper, all 3 were top candidates, but he needed to know if they could handle the real work. Bringing them into his office, he laid out the challenge. "All right, gentlemen, you look great on paper, but I need to see what you can do in the field. So here's the deal. Go out today and set as many telephone poles as you can. Come back tomorrow and report your numbers." The 3 men nodded and got to work. The next morning, they returned, eager to share their results. The boss turned to the first guy. "How many poles did you set?" 13, the man replied confidently. The boss whistled. "Wow, that's impressive." He turned to the second guy. "And you?" 9. "Not as good as 13, but still a solid effort," the boss said, nodding. Finally, he turned to the third guy, a blonde-haired man standing tall with a triumphant grin. "And you? How many did you set?" The man puffed out his chest. 2. The boss blinked. 2? That's it? What were you doing all day?" The blonde man crossed his arms and scoffed. "Well, I didn't want to say anything, but those other guys, they only put theirs halfway in the ground." "When I was a kid, my parents took me to a psychiatrist for one of those aptitude tests. He laid out a pitchfork, a wrench, and a hammer on his desk. Then he said to the nurse, 'If he grabs the pitchfork, he'll be a farmer. If he grabs the wrench, he'll be a mechanic. If he takes the hammer, he'll be a carpenter.' I grabbed the nurse. The town I grew up in was so dull, one day the tide went out and never came back. My wife, bless her, takes the car out every day. And every time she comes home, she says the same thing. Guess who I ran into? A piano tuner was once called to a nightclub to tune the piano. He worked at it for 5 hours, but when he handed the bill to the manager, it was only £3. The manager stared at him. 'Is that all? You spent 5 hours tuning that piano and you're only charging £3. The piano tuner squinted and said, 'What?' The other day, a dog bit a chunk out of my leg. My friend asked, 'Did you put anything on it?' I said, 'No, he liked it as it was.' My wife is really into DIY. Every time I ask her to fix something, she says, 'Oh, do it yourself.' She also does her own decorating, but she overdoes it. The other day, I opened the fridge, and there was a lampshade on the light bulb. I once swam the English Channel. People say, that's impressive. But lots of people have done that. I say, yeah, but did they do it lengthwise? I used to date a girl who smiled all the time. She's the only person I know whose teeth actually got sunburned. A leopard once went to see a psychiatrist. 'Doctor, every time I look at my wife, I see spots before my eyes.' The psychiatrist nodded. 'That's only natural.' 'But, doctor,' the leopard said, 'my wife's a zebra.' A drunk was brought into the police station one night, slamming his fist on the counter. "I demand to know why I've been arrested!" The officer said, "Sir, you were brought in for drinking." The drunk sighed in relief. "Oh, that's all right then. Let's get started." "I always sit in the back of the plane. Much safer. You never hear of a plane backing into a mountain." One bright morning, a priest, a doctor, and an engineer were out for a round of golf, excited to enjoy their well-earned day on the course. However, their enthusiasm quickly turned to frustration as they found themselves stuck behind an agonizingly slow group of golfers. The engineer checked his watch and groaned. "What is going on with these guys? We've been waiting for 25 minutes. The doctor shook his head. "I swear I've never seen such incompetence. Do they even know how to play?" The priest, trying to maintain his patience, spotted the greenskeeper approaching and waved him over. "George, glad to see you. Say, what's the deal with that group ahead of us? They're moving slower than Sunday service." George sighed. "Oh, that's the group of blind firefighters. They lost their sight while saving our clubhouse from a fire last year. As a token of gratitude, we let them play here anytime, free of charge." A heavy silence fell over the trio. The priest cleared his throat, his frustration melting away. "That's truly heartbreaking. I'll say a special prayer for them tonight." The doctor, looking ashamed, nodded. "I'll call my ophthalmologist friend. Maybe there's something that can be done to help." The engineer, still watching the slow-moving group, frowned in thought. Then he asked, "Yeah, but why can't they play at night?" After 35 years of marriage, Tom and Linda found themselves sitting stiffly in a marriage counselor's office. The tension in the room was palpable. The therapist folded her hands on the desk. "So what seems to be the problem?" That was all Tom needed. He launched into a passionate, almost theatrical rant, unloading decades of grievances. "Neglect, loneliness, no intimacy. I feel unloved, unappreciated. I've spent years enduring this marriage, hoping things would change." On and on he went, his voice rising with every complaint. Linda sat quietly, arms crossed, waiting for the storm to pass. The therapist listened patiently, then, without a word, stood up, walked around the desk, and gestured for Tom to stand. Confused, Tom got to his feet, only to be met with a long, deep, passionate kiss. Linda's eyebrows shot up. Tom wobbled slightly and sat back down, his face dazed, his rant completely derailed. The therapist turned to Linda and said, "This is what your husband needs at least 3 times a week. Can you make that happen?" Linda tapped her chin thoughtfully. "Well," she said, "I can drop him off here on Mondays and Wednesdays, but Friday's a book club." 2 men, Steve and Bob, were eager to squeeze in a quick 18 holes before lunch. But as they made their way through the course, they found themselves stuck behind 2 women who were taking their sweet time, chatting between swings and carefully lining up every putt. After several holes of waiting, Steve sighed. "This is ridiculous. Why don't you go over and ask if we can play through?" Bob nodded and started walking toward the women, but halfway there he suddenly stopped, turned around and hurried back, looking flustered. Steve frowned. "What happened?" Bob hesitated, then muttered under his breath. "One of them is my wife, and the other's my mistress." Steve's eyes widened. "Oof. Yeah, that's a problem." He glanced at the women. "All right, I'll go instead." With a confident stride, Steve marched off toward the pair. But just like Bob, he froze midway, spun on his heel, and briskly walked back. Bob raised an eyebrow. "What now?" Steve sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Same problem." Mark and Lisa had only been married for 2 weeks, and while Mark was madly in love with his new wife, he was also itching to hit the town with his old buddies. One evening, as Lisa was curled up on the couch, Mark cleared his throat and put on his best innocent smile. "Honey, I'll be right back." Lisa looked up, batting her lashes. "Where are you going, coochie-coo?" Mark hesitated. I'm just heading to the bar, pretty face. Just a quick beer with the guys." Lisa's eyes twinkled. "Oh, you want a beer, my love?" She stood up, walked over to the fridge, and with a dramatic flourish, swung the door open. Inside was a veritable beer museum, 25 different brands from 12 countries, Germany, Holland, Japan, India, you name it. Mark gulped. Yeah, lollipop, but at the bar, they have frozen glasses." Lisa smiled sweetly. "You want a frozen glass, puppy face?" She opened the freezer and pulled out an enormous beer mug, so cold it frosted over instantly in her hands. She handed it to him with a wink. Mark's face paled. "Yes, Tootsie Roll, but at the bar they have, hors d'oeuvres, really delicious ones. I won't be long, I swear." Lisa's smile widened. "Oh, you want hors d'oeuvres, Poochie Poo?" She turned to the oven, pulled out 5 steaming trays, chicken wings, pigs in blankets, stuffed mushrooms, crispy pork strips. The works. The smell was heavenly. Mark felt sweat forming on his forehead. But my sweet honey, at the bar, there's swearing and guys telling dirty jokes and all that." Lisa leaned in, her voice still sugary sweet. "You want dirty words, sweetie pie?" She smiled. Then, in the calmest, most terrifying tone, she added, Drink your bloody beer in your darn frozen mug and eat your stupid snacks because you are married now and you aren't going anywhere. Got it, moron? An airplane is about to crash. A female passenger jumps up and shouts, "If I'm going to die, I want to die feeling like a woman." With that, she strips off her clothes and says, "Is there someone on this plane who's man enough to make me feel like a woman?" A male passenger shouts, "Yes, me." He stands up, tears off his shirt, and says, "Here, iron this." A humble quarter met his end and ascended to heaven. As he approached the pearly gates, trumpets blared, angels sang, and the Lord himself stood at the entrance with open arms. "Welcome, my faithful servant," God declared. The quarter was ushered into heaven's finest accommodations, a radiant cloud of gold and white, overflowing with riches, food, and honey to last for eternity. Overjoyed, he settled into his celestial paradise, basking in the divine hospitality. The very next day, a $100 bill passed away and also found himself rising toward heaven. Expecting a similar grand entrance, he straightened his edges and floated toward the gates, only to find them eerily silent. No trumpets, no choir, not even a welcome committee. Confused, he pushed the gate open himself and stepped inside. The only angel in sight was slouched against a cloud, absent-mindedly scrolling through his heavenly smartphone. Hello?" the $100 bill called out. "I've arrived." The angel barely looked up. Yeah, over there." Following the half-hearted gesture, the bill arrived at his designated cloud, a dull, gray, stormy little thing that drizzled continuously. It sagged under his weight, barely holding him up. Fuming, he looked around and spotted the quarter next to him, lounging on an enormous, gleaming white cloud, surrounded by angels celebrating in divine revelry. Unable to take the injustice any longer, the $100 bill stormed off to find God. "Lord," he protested, "this isn't fair. Look at me, I'm worth $100. That guy's just a quarter. Why does he get the best cloud while I get this miserable rain patch?" God looked at him and sighed. "Well," he said, "we just didn't see you in church all that often." A man had two sons, Jackson and Blake. From an early age, it was clear that Jackson was sharp as a tack, while Blake had the problem-solving skills of a potato. Still, they were both deeply loved by their father. Years passed, and when their father eventually fell ill and passed away, Jackson, who was away on business, called Blake with an urgent request. "Listen, I have an enormously important meeting, but I'll be on the first flight home. In the meantime, here are my credit card details. Make sure Dad looks his best. Get him everything money can buy for the funeral. Spare no expense." Jackson hesitated. He wasn't sure if entrusting Blake with this was a great idea, but with no other choice, he had to hope for the best. Surprisingly, Blake handled everything perfectly. The arrangements were tasteful, the expenses reasonable, and the funeral was a heartfelt affair. Jackson was genuinely impressed. Maybe Blake wasn't so hopeless after all. A few months later, while reviewing his credit card statements, Jackson noticed something odd. He called his brother. "Hey, Blake, I don't want to accuse you of anything, but, could it be that you're still using my card? There's a $300 charge every month that I don't recognize." Blake sounded offended. "What? Of course not. I would never steal from you. You know that." Jackson sighed. "Yeah, I do. But how do you explain these charges?" There was a brief silence. Then Blake's voice came back, casual as ever. "Oh, that must be for Dad's tux." Jackson blinked. "What?" "Well, you did say you wanted him to look his best," Blake explained. "So I rented the most expensive suit in town." Many years ago, a wealthy businessman found himself entangled in a secret affair with a beautiful Italian woman. Their romance was passionate but risky. His reputation and marriage were at stake. One evening, during one of their clandestine meetings, she took a deep breath and confessed, "I'm pregnant." The man paled. This was a complication he couldn't afford. After a moment of silence, he reached for his checkbook. "I'll make sure you're taken care of," he said. "Take this money, go back to Italy, and raise the child there. I'll send support until the child turns 18. But to keep things discreet, let's do this. When the baby is born, send me a postcard. Just write spaghetti on the back. I'll know what it means." Though skeptical, she agreed, and soon after, she returned to Italy. Months passed, and the businessman continued his life as if nothing had happened. Then, one afternoon, he came home from work to find his wife holding a postcard, a puzzled expression on her face. "You got a strange piece of mail today," she said, handing it to him. "Care to explain?" His heart pounded as he took the card from her. His eyes scanned the back of the postcard. Then, without a word, his face drained of color, and he collapsed to the floor. Alarmed, his wife snatched up the postcard and read it aloud. "Spaghetti, spaghetti, spaghetti! 2 with meatballs, 1 without." One afternoon, a man was strolling through the woods when his foot kicked something half buried in the dirt. Curious, he picked it up, a dusty, old lamp. Instinctively, he wiped it off with his sleeve. Poof! A massive cloud of smoke erupted, and suddenly, a genie appeared before him. "Thank you for freeing me," the genie boomed. "As a reward, I shall grant you 3 wishes." The man's eyes widened in excitement. He had dreamed of this moment. Without hesitation, he declared, "First, I want $1 billion." The genie snapped his fingers. Poof! A sleek briefcase appeared at the man's feet, overflowing with crisp $100 bills. The man's hands trembled as he flipped through the stacks of cash. "Amazing!" he gasped. "Okay, next, I want a Ferrari." Snap! Another puff of smoke, and right in front of him sat a glistening cherry-red Ferrari, its engine purring softly. The man grinned. "All right, for my final wish, I want to be irresistible to women." The genie smirked. Snap! And just like that, poof, the man was gone. In his place sat a beautifully wrapped box of chocolates.